Tonight, jury selection begins in the Whitey Bulger trial. What potential jurors are being asked to divulge. Plus, the fatal shooting of a young black bear has Newton residents at odds. And a Boston vintage clothing legend takes us inside his vast collection. Now on Greater Boston. Good evening. Jury selection for the James Whitey Bulger trial is finally underway. Today in federal court, the accused mobster met some of the 675 men and women who, if selected to serve as jurors, could decide his fate. Bulger himself started the proceedings in a lively demeanor, but that slowly turned to fatigue by the afternoon as it became clear the selection process could take days. Both David Frank of Mass Lawyers Weekly and WGBH's Adam Reilly were in court today to see it all come down.
Hey,
welcome. So now you were just saying, David, that they're not going to be done by the end of the week with this jury selection. It could be all next week, maybe even into a third.
Absolutely. I mean, the judge initially had said that she planned to have jury selection done in 4 days. That seemed crazy to me. That didn't seem like any way that they would be able to do it. And we now know from what's come out that it's not going to happen, that it's going to certainly extend into next week, and it could go even longer.
So were all 675 jurors in one place? How was the judge addressing them?
Well, they're doing it in installments. There's two groups came in today, one at 9, one at 1. We're going to have the same thing tomorrow, right? And I believe today's groups, I think, were a little larger maybe than tomorrow's will be. But it was a packed room. The jury assembly hall at the Moakley Courthouse was standing room only.
And she was telling these people, don't tell anyone you're associated with the Bulger trial. What, you go home and you say, what are you going to say? Oh, I was on jury duty today. Oh, really? What were some of the cases?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Small little matter, traffic matter.
What's the difference if they tell people?
Well, I mean, right now, one of the huge obstacles that the lawyers are going to be dealing with in jury selection is pretrial publicity and exposure that jurors have had to the case.
Yeah.
And clearly, we know that during jury selection, the issue is going to be not whether they've heard about the case, but whether they've formed opinions and whether they can be fair and impartial jurors. And it's certainly reasonable for any judge, and Judge Casper in this situation, to be really direct with these jurors. Don't talk about the case. Perhaps it would happen, but you've got to take every precaution possible to make sure that any exposure that's out there. And she also told them not to watch television and all that, but you have to do that, because if you don't at least take those precautions, you run the risk that everything you and I and Adam we're all talking about now could be something that potential jurors are listening to.
I was actually surprised. My recollection is that she didn't tell people to sort of swear off the media altogether, but said if you happen to be watching TV and you come across a story about this, or if you're reading the paper and you see an article about it, or if you happen to come across something online, shut the website, turn the page of the paper, turn off the TV. And maybe it's just impossible to tell people to avoid media altogether. Right. But I kind of feel like in a case like this, I mean, this is all over the Boston press right now. There's no way to avoid it if you're paying any attention to the news.
But it doesn't matter what trial it is, and we've seen plenty. I mean, I've come on your show, Emily, whether it's Neil Entwistle or McCowan. There have been huge, high-profile cases in Massachusetts. Judges never tell jurors to turn their televisions off or don't read the newspaper. It's just about being smart and being practical and not exposing yourself to things that are being said about this case.
The jurors have to go through quite a session here. They got to answer these long questionnaires. Usually questionnaires are like 13 questions long. This one is like 40. What kind of stuff are they asking them?
Well, we don't know the current iteration. Actually, last I checked, the original questionnaire that was put out by the judge is available in the PACER system, the online document system for the courts. But for whatever reason, you can tell me, I don't know if this is standard or not, her office is not releasing the updated version. So we don't know what points were added because she feels strongly that this is key information. I don't know why she has refused to make that public. I'm not sure.
Well, I'm surprised. I was surprised, too. I mean, we do know, in general, the types of questions that they're asking, things about individual jurors' backgrounds, whether they've had family members who have been exposed to law enforcement, either on the good end of it or the bad end of it. There are questions about, obviously, what kind of newspapers they read, what kind of exposure they've had to the Bulger case, the typical stuff that any of us might get when we get a note in the mail for jury duty. It's just that the number of questions and the specificity in those questions is unusual.
I don't see how they're going to find it anyway. But the question we keep wondering, this trial could go well past September, October, November, who knows? I mean, how are these people reimbursed? I mean, if you have a full-time job, you're supposed to continue getting your salary. But what if you're a real estate agent? I mean, isn't hardship like one of the issues to exclude you?
Absolutely. I mean, in my opinion, Emily, I think it's going to be harder to find jurors for that reason than it is to find jurors who
are impartial.
Right. I think that's the biggest obstacle. And the law is not particularly forgiving to jurors. I mean, you can't obviously be fired or discriminated against because you're sitting on a jury. But really, the way the law is set up is I think you're entitled to about $40 a day if you sit on a jury. And if a trial goes more than, I think, 10 days, it can go up to the whopping amount of $50 a day. But it's a very difficult position for any potential juror. So when you take that into account, when you take into account that jurors have families and lives, there are going to be legitimate hardships.
Summer vacations.
And the judge said today that she's cognizant of the personal sacrifice that serving on this jury will require. She said one reason that we're closing at 1 o'clock 4 days of the week, Monday through Wednesday, and then again on Friday, is to try to mitigate a little bit the hit that your personal life is going to take if you happen to be sitting on this jury.
I'd rather get it over with.
That doesn't leave you, I mean, you know, what, you're out of there at 1:30 and then you're back in the next morning at 8:30.
What are you going to do, go to work in the afternoon?
Right,
Is that the suggestion?
That's what she said today. I mean, in federal court, that's generally how judges do it. Usually they go from 9 to 1, and then the judge says, hey, I can use the afternoon for my other business. But the judge did make a point today to say that that's part of why they're doing it.
But if you try to do that, I mean, she had said, you know, well, you can't talk to people about what case you've been called on, but you can talk to people about your schedule. But if you tell them that, you know, if I called you and said I'm going to be free at 2 every day for the next 4 months, you would know exactly what was going on. We should talk really briefly.
I'd nail you down on that one, Adam.
We should talk briefly, I think, about Bulger's demeanor in court today. He gave a very hearty good morning when he was introduced to the jurors in the morning session, but by the afternoon, and I saw him in the afternoon, not in the morning, he looked to me almost catatonic. He was sitting there staring straight ahead as the judge spoke to his left. His mouth was open. He looked old and tired.
Well, he sat to the same 4-hour pretrial conference we did yesterday.
All right. David, Frank, Adam Reilly, thanks.
Thanks, Emily.
So what would it be like to serve as a juror for a 2-month or 3-month trial? On Thursday, we'll talk to a woman who did just that. That's part of our continuing coverage of the James Whitey Bulger trial. We'll have all the developments right here on Greater Boston and on 89.7 WGBH and WGBHnews.org.